Hello, Janesville, and welcome back to Park Place Views, the monthly program that aims to keep residents informed by highlighting the people, places, and partners of the City of Janesville. As always, this program is brought to you by the City of Janesville and JATV Media Services. I'm your host, Nick Faust, a communications specialist in the City Manager's Office. On last month's episode, we welcomed Hedberg Public Library Director Brian McCormick to talk with us about all things HPL. Director McCormick helped us recap their busy summer, highlighted all the library's various community resources, and told us what's in store for fall. If you're interested in viewing that episode or any past episode of Park Place Views, they're all available to watch on demand on the city's website or JATV's YouTube channel. Today I'm fortunate enough to be able to sit down with Gale Price, the city's Economic Development Director. Now, if you've been out and about Janesville recently, you will certainly have noticed that our city is teeming with economic activity. Whether it's new stores, restaurants, manufacturing facilities, or even entertainment options, all of this exciting development is aided by the work of our staff in the Economic Development Office. And Gale and his team have certainly been busy facilitating this growth. So I'm happy to be able to sit down with him and catch up on all of the latest projects. Director Price originally came to Janesville in 2001 as the Senior Planner Site Plan Review Coordinator within the Planning Department. In 2005, when the city created the Community Development Department, Gale was promoted to Manager of Building and Development Services. And in 2015, most recently, Gale became the City of Janesville's Economic Development Director. He holds a Bachelor of Urban Planning degree from the University of Cincinnati in Ohio, and before working for the City of Janesville, Gale held 3 different planner positions over a 10-year period for the City of Champaign, Illinois. Thanks for joining us today, Gale.
Well, thank you, Nick. I appreciate being here today.
Wonderful. And before we get started, Gale, I would just like to maybe give you a chance to tell the community a bit about yourself.
Well, a little bit about myself. Originally from Ohio, as you mentioned, graduated from the University of Cincinnati. I've been in Janesville for 20 years now, hard to believe. I have a wife, Mandy, who is actually another city employee, and we have 2 boys, Will and AJ, who are great little young men and growing up fast.
Yes, I bet. That's wonderful, Gale. And now just to kind of start again, we know economic development is undoubtedly imperative to the long-term success of our community, and it's certainly something that maybe we hear about quite often. However, I think it's always helpful for the public to maybe first summarize what economic development entails and why it's so important to the average citizen.
Well, really, economic development is a multifaceted approach to, bolstering just that, the economy, and it's really looking at a number of different things. It's looking at building development. It's looking at workforce development. Housing development has more recently evolved. And, building up our business infrastructure, supporting businesses if they're, a first-time or early start business, and even supporting our long-term businesses. As things evolve and we have to pivot to address various things, we need to be there as a partner to help close those gaps for all of our companies. And it's also about downtown revitalization and redevelopment of our downtown. We've made so much investment in the downtown that it really is reflective of the fact that growing, strong communities have a great downtown, and that is also growing. So a lot of different things that we do and have to kind of work with, but all of those are part of that puzzle that really makes the community great.
Yeah, and I think then perhaps critical to economic development and growing the community is the goal of diversifying and adding to our city's tax base. And I think why would that be maybe so important, and what are the keys in that area?
So when we think about diversification, in any business, you don't want all your eggs in one basket. Mm-hmm. You want to have various partners that you're working with or clients that you're selling to, whatever that might be. Diversification was so important and noticeably needed after GM closed here, and we had a number of support companies that also closed as a result. And now we had been moving towards diversification long before General Motors closed, but we really needed to focus on our assets, what we had, strengths and abilities and assets in place to build off of those. and to further diversify the economy. And if you look at what we've done over the last, say, 8 years, we've done just that. We have many more companies that are in different areas, many of which relate to our strengths, like metal fabrication, plastics manufacturing, etc. But we've also had some others that further diversified what that might be. And that diversification is important because when you have a sector of the economy that's hit, like auto right now with the lack of chips, that brings down all of that, that industry and supportive industries. If you have a broad base of various types of businesses, then you're better able to weather, an economic storm. And we really kind of saw that at the front end of the pandemic because so many of our businesses were able to stay open. They were actually able to pivot, move to product that was much needed during the pandemic, and then continue their business development and growth. So it's really fascinating kind of when you put together kind of what we've done here with our partners at Rock County Development Alliance and Rock 5.0 to really kind of help that diversification. So early on it was about marketing the community and building off of that, and now we've pivoted to where it's a little bit more focused on workforce development.
Yeah, and I think if we could follow maybe that thread a little further, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, I think our community was really able to continue this momentum, this economic momentum we have, and working through the challenges posed by truly a momentous global health crisis. How has the city been able to ensure that that event didn't derail our community's momentum?
Well, so much of that was really about the fact that we had these companies that were able to continue to operate. We were fortunate in Wisconsin that the manufacturers were allowed to continue to operate. But one of the odd things about this pandemic was that our healthcare providers, who are usually the strongest of the economies, had to lay people off temporarily. And so that was a bit of a hit. That's why we had that spike up to 17% in unemployment, but it came down extremely quickly once those the health providers got back to kind of more normal operations and so forth. But again, it goes back to the diversification. If we had not diversified, over the last whatever years, we would not have done nearly as well through this pandemic as we have.
Right, and so critical to the health of our community. And I think maybe then, in your recent experience, would you say that the companies and the private partners you work with, do they remain willing and able to invest and grow despite the pandemic? Yeah,
we've seen companies grow in the community despite the pandemic. In fact, there's some companies that actually grew significantly because of the pandemic. So that's an interesting caveat that's kind of evolved through this. But, all in all, we've continued to see investment in the community. We've had basically developers come in and start building speculative industrial space in order to attract and or help local companies grow in the community. We've seen other investments where, like Western Containers building a new factory on the south side. These are all great news stories that just exemplify the fact that Janesville continues to grow. People believe in this community, and they see a value proposition in making an investment here.
Yeah, and I think as we maybe talk about that growth, as we look around for signs of progress, we can certainly see it being realized in our housing sector here in Janesville. In August, we saw the publication of the 2020 U.S. Census, which found that the city now has 65,615 residents, and that's an increase of a little over 2,000 since the last census. We also saw the state's Demographic Services Center release estimations that found the city added 192 units of housing in 2020, particularly with the addition of new multifamily apartment developments. What projects are really driving our community's population growth?
Well, it's an interesting conversation because one would argue that there's actually growth companies that are attracting people here. So Shine's a great example of where you're bringing outside people to the community because they have those skill sets that match what they're doing there. But we also would say that there's some pent-up demand. So for the many years that we did not have multifamily development in the community. So for 13 years, we had no apartments built.
Yeah.
Those people had to go someplace to live. And so many of them were going to like Hawks Landing and Beloit or some of the other outlying communities that had multifamily or had other housing available. And now that we are catching up with the Glade, with the River Flats project, with Diamond Ridge, that those places are being filled immediately as soon as they're done.
Yeah.
So in many cases, those are people that they wanted to be here, but they didn't have a housing choice. So now that there's some more housing choices, we're seeing that backfill. So it's a really interesting dichotomy as to how this is evolving. The other point I'd like to make with regards to the census is, the 2010 census was right on the heels of the closure of GM.
Yeah.
And I've spent my entire life in the Midwest, and every other community that I have watched in the Midwest lose a major employer like we did, lost population.
Right.
And we did not. We still grew. And that's just a testament to people want to live in Janesville. This is a great location. We have good schools here. We have all of these things in place that really makes Janesville a community of choice. And I think we've demonstrated that with this new census.
Yeah, and talking about that, the community of choice, we think and we know that residential development is critical in our city's ability to provide that growing economy with its much-needed labor. How does the city and its partners look at bringing in the skilled workforce needed? What resources do we look to?
Well, we have a number of partners when it comes to workforce, and we have Southwest Wisconsin Workforce Development. We have Rock County Development Alliance and Rock 5.0, where we've pivoted, where we in the front end we were marketing attraction. Then we recognized that there was an issue with workforce, so we started working the workforce piece a little bit more. Janesville School District is another great example. Blackhawk Technical College, University of Wisconsin, Whitewater at Rock County. I mean, they all play a piece in training our workforce and getting them to the point where they're providing whatever workforce into the community that we need. So we got a number of partners out there. We've worked collaboratively to work and address the workforce piece. But one of the things that we see is that if you don't have places for people to live, you're not going to attract that workforce. And the Housing and Development Summit in 2018, which we partnered with Forward Janesville on, was so important to get the message out about where are we at housing-wise and how do we work through the issues that we were kind of faced with at that time. We were one of the first communities in Wisconsin to kind of take the bull by the horns there and say we need to address this housing issue because it's going to cascade all the way down through workforce and right down to our companies. So, so I like to think that on the development side, the workforce development, all of our education partners, Southwest Wisconsin Workforce Development, we all have a piece in this to help develop that workforce. But then the finish is the housing piece.
Is that housing piece, and I think maybe topically then on the flip side of that coin. When we think about those educated, skilled folks in the workforce looking for a community to come take their talents to, what are you finding those individuals looking for, and why should they end up choosing Janesville as a place for that?
Well, for a lot of people, it's about their family. If you do not have a safe community, if you do not have good schools, you are not going to be that choice. I recall a conversation with a couple that their son went to daycare with my oldest years ago. And I asked him that very question. why did you choose Janesville? Because the husband was a contractor working from home. The wife was working in Madison, and those were the reasons. They looked at our schools. They liked our schools. They felt that they were very strong. They liked the location, the ability for him when he's on his contract work to get to a bigger airport. She could get to Madison for her work, and then the value proposition of Janesville and the cost of housing was a lot less than many of these other communities. And so those are all great factors that build and help attract people to this community. And when we think about, other investments we've made in the community, you look at the town square and how beautiful that is, and now that's attracting other investment into, Main Street, the Genesville project as an example, the Cobblestone Hotel a few years ago. Those are all pieces that demonstrate, we're growing, we are a neat community, people want to be here.
Yeah, and I think that that's so true, and I'm really glad you mentioned our downtown, because that's an area I think many folks in the community have noticed significant progress. You talk the infrastructure improvements, new shops like Janissa, and the development of our truly spectacular town square. How is the city able to kind of collaboratively, I should say, realize those community successes?
It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of background work before we get there. We leverage every grant that we could possibly get to be able to make those things happen. So we've had a number of stewardship grants, other DNR grants for the town square. We've used tax increment financing on our piece of it. The Wisconsin Department of Transportation has a huge piece of not only the bridge reconstruction on Milwaukee Street, but then the Milwaukee Street reconstruction itself. And all of those organizations have a piece of the pie that helps us to be able to succeed in moving these things forward. Now there's a fair amount of pain to get to the gain, because you're closing off the street and those kind of things, but we're not going to be back in that street again for another 45 or 50 years. So that, I think, really demonstrates Janesville's commitment to the downtown, the belief that we need to invest in the downtown in order to leverage additional investment in the private side. And I think we're seeing that. People are calling the Economic Development Office. They're talking to us about how can we do X in our building, or help us understand how to navigate to get to something that is creating more revenue for the property owner. That's important, because if they've got revenue coming in because they're leasing upstairs space or apartments, then that means that there's more tax base in the downtown. It all plays into itself very well, and again, demonstrates success. So it's fun to be in the Economic Development Office right now, because we're seeing these things get complete on the public side, and people are really believing in making investments in the downtown.
Yeah, and I think one tool that you kind of touched on there that I'd love to speak a little more about, Gale, is this resource that the city and our economic development team use called tax increment financing, or TIFs. And we know that since 2010, the city has helped create over 1,700 jobs in our community through these agreements. Could you perhaps tell the community a little bit more about TIF deals and any recent examples you might have?
Sure. So tax increment financing, or TIF, is our number one tool for promoting development and growth in the community. We have 14 districts within the community, and they are a variety of locations and types. There are industrial TIFs, where we do our industrial parks. There are redevelopment TIFs, like the downtown TIF. And then there's blight TIFs that we use also for redevelopment. And again, each district has a specific type, and then they can be open so many years, and depending on that type. Now, tax increment financing is basically, you define a geographic area that you want to develop or redevelop, And at that point, the base value is identified. And that base value is the bottom, is the floor at the start. And then over time, as investments are made in the district, there is growth in that tax base. And from the base to the growth, that is captured into a single pot. And that includes the city's piece, the county's piece, the school district of Janesville's piece, and Black Hawk Technical College's piece.
Yeah.
And so everyone's growth in the district is captured in the fund. We either use that for promoting additional development, redevelopment. We may make investments in infrastructure that we take out debt on, and then we pay off that debt over time. But all in all, at the end of the district, the costs that are invested have to be recaptured in the district. And once we complete the project plan and pay off all of our investments or pay our development deals, then we can close out the district. Then the taxing jurisdictions receive 1/2 of the growth, and then the other half is applied towards tax reduction or real property tax reduction. So it's our number one tool to help promote development and redevelopment. And I'll tell you, in downtown, it is so important to be a partner, especially when we look at the historic nature of our downtown. We have one of the largest historic downtowns in the state. And when people work on these buildings and they make it, need to make an investment, they sometimes open up Pandora's box, or, space hasn't been used in the building for 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, today's cost of construction and what the potential rents are going to be, there's typically a gap there. And so we use that to fill the gap to help promote the development. So we work with the applicant, we work with their financer, and then we close up what that gap is between what the bank can do and what the value or the cost of the project's going to be.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, in our downtown and other places around town, those TIFs have been so important in spurring development. And Gale, sometimes we hear critiques, and perhaps in other communities, of TIFs and the cost benefit behind them. What does the city's economic development team do to ensure that those deals work for the community and end up being favorable for our taxpayers?
Well, tax increment financing is always about, but for the help, the project doesn't happen. So we have to vet every project and sit down with them, look at their financials, understand how the project's going to cash flow, if it's a rent-paying building or if it's a company that wants to move to town but own their own building. What does that look like? And so we go through a fairly lengthy due diligence to figure out, does this deal make sense? Is it good for the community? Is the ask reasonable given all the factors in the market? And then we go to the council with an agreement and a recommendation if it passes muster with the Economic Development Office. And it does sometimes take a fair amount of time to get to a deal because there are so many moving pieces. But when we look at our successes, so over the last 6.5, 7 years, we've leveraged $340 million in investment in the community. Wow. That's a tremendous amount of money. And you can look at a construction site and say, wow, those are people here in the community that are working on the construction site. Maybe it's a subcontractor or whatever that is. But that's real investment, because maybe they wouldn't have that construction job if that project didn't move forward. The other piece of that $340 million in investment is that helps us on what's referred to as net new construction. So the city cannot raise the property tax any more than what our net new construction is for a year. And if we didn't have that investment over the last 7 years, our ability to have enough revenue to provide all the
Yes.
whole host of services to the community may not be there.
Yeah.
I mean, we might have to be making hard choices about, do we continue to have public trash pickup or operate a landfill? There's a lot of different pieces of the city services that all come back to general fund revenues, and we can't increase those if we don't have growth. It's unfortunate that the state has it structured that way, but it's the real world we have to deal with. So, yeah, $340 million over 7 years is a lot of net new construction, and it's really, helped us be able to continue to provide all of the services that the community expects and wants.
So key, and that is really an incredible figure. And I think then as we talk about perhaps the state and we look at the factors at play from a larger perspective, in your professional opinion, what then are some state and federal regulations and policies that could really assist Janesville as we look at economic growth?
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about these policies right now, because we have an economic policy at the federal level that is just very interesting as we're reacting to COVID-19. ARPA monies and just whatever else is coming down the line. When I come down to really what we think on the economic development side needs to be focused on is continued workforce development. We need to match people up with the industries that are growing and have the skill sets that are ready to go to meet those needs. Now, is just throwing money at the problem going to solve it? Not really, because the other piece to that workforce issue was predicted in the early 80s when you look at the bell curve of all the baby boomers starting to retire. Well, we didn't have enough population birth rate growth to keep up with all of those baby boomers starting to head into retirement. So that's going to continue to be an issue for communities for a while, because that bell curve is continuing to move across the sheet, and we just don't have enough workforce coming in. Now, again, let's match people up with the areas that we have continued growth in, and work with our community partners, our education partners, to help match those people with skills to get them to those jobs. So, we could talk at length about state and federal policy. The other thing that I struggle with, again, is some of the unfairness in the state policy as it relates to shared revenue, as it relates to growth in the tax rate. People expect the community to provide services. And when you look at other communities in other states, many of those years ago moved to privatization of many of their core services. And, I think a lot of people would not want to see Janesville move to privatize, because once you move to privatization, there's a profit margin involved, and the operation and revenue generation is handled much differently than when it's handled in the public sector.
It is, and certainly things to be cognizant of as you and all the city staff continue to advocate for our community at the state and federal level. And I think then maybe, as you talked about emerging fields and stuff, bringing back locally then, Gale, I know another critical economic resource the city helps provide is the Janesville Innovation Center, or JIC, as it's kind of known for short. And that's located on the city's south side. And as I understand, it serves as a tool for startups in our community. And could you tell us a little bit more about that and what the JIC all really provides?
So the Janesville Innovation Center is a business incubator, and it's focused primarily on industrial and kind of technologically related businesses. And we provide space, we provide internet and phone service, and we provide, most importantly, business coaching. So many times we have innovators in this community that have this product that they've invented, and they want to move it to market, or maybe they've started to sell that product, but they're manufacturing it out of their home, garage, basement, whatever. And how do they make that next step? Well, the Innovation Center provides that key infrastructure to move somebody out of their house into an appropriate business space, and then the business coaching. Because so many times we see somebody's a great mind at starting something and moving it forward, but they need some help with how do you manage this? How do you grow the business? One thing that people that haven't had a startup, they don't understand that, with any time you're trying to grow a business, you've got to have more investment into it. So you need funds to make that happen. And how do you manage that? How do you manage what that looks like over a near term and longer term? So you want to bring on an employee, but you got to have more capital in on the input side to have the output for more sales to pay the employee. Those are all things that we do with the help of Mike Matthews, who is the manager for the Innovation Center. That is such a great good news story, because we've grown so many businesses out of that facility over the last 8 years now, and we continue to have new businesses come in. We've just had an amazing little growth spurt down there, where we've got businesses that are moving in. They're actually moving around space inside the building because the space that they started in is too small now, and they're graduating to another space.
Wonderful.
And so if we can continue to foster that ingenuity and business development, then they will get to the point where they can graduate out of the building and move into other space. So we had a meeting at American Extractions today for the JIC board. Great story. They started out as Simply Solutions, and they have continued to evolve that business to where they're in 30,000 square feet in a manufacturing facility. Copper Fire Teas is another great one. It's Brian, who's the owner of the company, started in his basement, and it got too small. They were growing the business, and then moved it to the Innovation Center, and moved, I believe it was 3 different times inside the building. They're out in 15,000 square feet in the community. And so these are the kind of things that if somebody's got an idea and has started to kind of move it forward, well, we can help kind of continue that growth, help them, meander through those processes, and hopefully be successful.
Yeah, and tremendous to hear those success stories and all that's going to continue to come out of that Innovation Center, because what a tremendous resource, again, for our community to have an incubator like that in town. And I think then, Gale, another accomplishment I'd love to highlight is Janesville's speed to market service, as we call it for businesses, and the city's development team, which includes economic development, the building division, and the planning division, take great pride in that. And what do you all mean when you say speed to market?
So in this competitive world of economic development, and I don't think we really even touched on that until just now, many of these industrial projects that we work with, they are courting many communities for a variety of reasons. Maybe one has a better location. Maybe one has better workforce. Maybe another one has a better site that's going to be less to build. But one of the things that we see is that when a site selector comes to us, most of the time now, it's about how fast can we get under construction and, more importantly, in production, operating the business. So one of the things that we did many years ago after the GM closure, we really evaluated our processes, and we looked at how can we streamline things? How can we create a collaborative environment where we are addressing the needs of the development community on a quick basis? So in our industrial parks, we are the primary or premier developer of industrial land in the community. We buy land, we prepare it for development. That's putting in all the infrastructure that's necessary, water, sewer, storm sewer, streets,
Yeah.
telecom, fiber optic, whatever. Have that ready to go and market that land for development. And so we have streamlined the process, again, in a collaborative manner, where we can guide a potential development to basically an early kind of front-end stage meeting to full approvals within 6 to 8 weeks.
Wow.
Again, depending on how complete their preliminary plans are.
Yeah.
But once they get a full set of plans into us, and that's civil, so that's site engineering, site plan, landscaping, lighting, we can get that approved in 2 weeks. And now, if they submit both the building and the civils, again, 2 weeks,
Yeah.
we can have it all approved. We've ensured that we are delegated as a municipality for plan review on most every type of building and site plan. And that is key, is that we control our destiny, we control the review process, and we provide the client clear direction on how to move forward. And as long as we get complete plans, they are in and out the door within just a couple of weeks. Now, there's sometimes that we have to go through a conditional use permit.
Yeah.
It's a little lengthier process because it's an initial reading by the Plan Commission and a final public hearing with the Plan Commission. So that can be 6 weeks. But we, by far, are the quickest community for review and approval in the state of Wisconsin. We see this time and time again, where we are actually out in front of the developer, and they are catching up to us because we've already identified things, we've already identified timeline, and we really lock them in. So
Yeah, and that you talk about that efficiency being the key to landing some of those opportunities, and how important that is, and we always remain ready for folks to come to our city. And I think that incredible speed to market service is probably just one of the many contributing factors impacting why companies are choosing Janesville. And I think maybe as we start to wrap here, why else would a prospective business look to the city as a place to grow and succeed in?
Well, we've got a great location. There are so many markets that we can hit within a day's drive. So Minneapolis, St. Paul, Des Moines, Chicago, Indianapolis, you name them. If they're 5 hours away or less, we can cover them in a day. And that's a really strong key piece for us. Certainly the state's investment in Interstate 9039, that's paramount. We need that infrastructure in place to be able to, ship goods and goods out and bring inputs in for our companies. Those are all great pieces. And then the value proposition of being in Janesville. It costs less here than it does in Madison or Milwaukee or some of our other competing communities. So, those are all pieces that make it possible and quite likely that somebody is going to look at Janesville to land their company.
Yeah, all pieces of that broader puzzle you speak of that really do make us a community of choice. And I think then as we look ahead, Gale, I know a big part of economic development is perhaps getting that crystal ball and planning for the future, anticipating market changes like you're talking about. And what do you really envision Janesville's economy looking like in 5, 10 years down the road? Where do you see it changing?
Well, it's great to see kind of where we've been and where we're at today. I'll be honest, I fully believe that we were going to recover from General Motors closure. But when you look at all the economic factors, we are light years ahead of where we were at even when General Motors was open and had 2 shifts. We have more people in employment. We have more people in the community. We've recovered from the loss of incomes to families. We have done as well, if not better, than any community like us in the Midwest. Now, I'm going to, go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say I really truly believe we're going to continue the momentum.
Yeah.
For the reasons that we have laid out already, that we've got great infrastructure here, we've got a great workforce here, we have land availability that we can service and continue to grow. I have to thank the City Council for believing in economic development as a program.
Yes.
And providing us the tools and the ability to be able to partner on projects. If we didn't have those policies in place that allowed us to partner, we would not be where we're at today. I think we're going to continue to see additional investment in multifamily. Our hope is that eventually those rents catch up with the cost of construction. We're going to continue to see investment in the downtown. We're working right now on a couple of potential residential projects.
Awesome.
And so we want to continue to promote that residential development, and especially in the downtown, because more heads and beds are going to equal more investment in other buildings within the downtown. And, in the end, I think the question mark is going to be retail. What is the retail market going to look like in 5 or 10 years? I think we'll probably see less of a footprint in retail just because people's buying habits are changing. They're not buying as much, they're not consuming as much, they're consuming more through online services. So maybe we'll see less bricks and mortar retailers, but hopefully we can see maybe more bricks and mortars restaurants and things like that that continue advancement of our commercial economy.
It's really heartening to hear that momentum is strong, and we really anticipate it continuing. And I think that should really maybe strengthen our community's outlook as we look ahead. And I think it's certainly fortunate for the city to have you and our talented staff in the Economic Development Office at the helm, preparing our community for the future. And to wrap things up, Gale, if folks want to learn more, perhaps, about economic development and the city's efforts in that area, where can they go and who can they talk to?
Well, they certainly can go to our Economic Development Office webpage. It's growjanesville.com. That's a wealth of resources. One of the things that we've done during the pandemic is we've listed out all kinds of business coaching videos, training videos, and then more importantly, where grants have been available to help businesses through the COVID-19 pandemic. And the Bounce Back program that was just announced at the Janesa here last month is a $10,000 grant to anyone who is opening a business in unoccupied space or growing their business into unoccupied space. And so if somebody's on the fence about starting a new business, what a great time to secure $10,000 of cash right into the business at the front end with no tax liability. So certainly growjanesville.com. They can call our office. My number is 608-755-3059. Always glad to help our community members and our citizens in the business community.
That's fantastic to hear. And that just about does it for us today, Gale. And I want to thank you for not only joining us today, but for all that the Economic Development Office is truly doing to enhance and grow our community. In spite of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think the expertise of you and your team has really allowed the city to, again, maintain that growing momentum we see in our community. And I know I can't wait to see what's next for Janesville. So thank you. And I also want to thank you, our viewers and residents, for tuning in today and for all you do to help make Janesville a community of choice to realize life's opportunities. Be sure to join us next month when I sit down with City Finance Director Dave Godak and get an insight into the city's finances and all the fun details of the city's upcoming budget process. I also invite you to stay connected with the city by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, signing up for emergency notifications from the JPD via the Nixle app, and signing up to receive our weekly city press releases by visiting www.janesvillewi.gov/email lists. For Park Place Views in the city of Janesville, I'm Nick Faust. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next month.